You see this map of America? It's lying to you. The real border, the one that actually holds this country together, isn't a political line. It's infrastructural. It's the power lines that feed our cities, the rivers that move our food, and the roads that deliver our water. When a major crisis hits, those political lines on the map stay right where they are. But the functional border, the one we rely on every single day, can break in an instant. It won't happen everywhere at once. It'll start at the weakest points. And once a single piece of that border infrastructure breaks, the systems behind it start to crumble too. This is the real map of how America could fracture. Let's look at exactly where it would happen first. Borders don't fail just because people cross them. They fail when the systems that support them stop working. There are 5 key ways this happens. First, hydrological collapse. Think about cities like Phoenix, Tucson, and El Paso. They are completely dependent on water from the Colorado River, the Rio Grande, and deep underground aquifers that are already running low. All this water is moved by canals that need constant power for their pumps. If the grid goes down, the water stops flowing. And when the water stops, people have no choice but to move. Second, thermal collapse. The Southwest is already pushing the limits of livability. Imagine a 110-degree heat wave combined with a power outage. Phoenix would become uninhabitable in just a few hours. No one can function, let alone secure a border, in that kind of extreme heat. The entire system just shuts down. Third is fuel corridor failure. America's border security runs on diesel. It powers the border patrol vehicles, the generators at checkpoints, and the rescue helicopters. A national diesel shortage would immobilize the entire border force almost overnight. If they can't move, they can't operate. Fourth, highway choke points. Look at a map of the southern U.S. There are really only a handful of major highways connecting east and west, like the I-8, I-10, and I-20. If just a couple of these key routes are blocked, whether by natural disaster or civil unrest, the entire southern half of the country becomes fragmented. A single blocked interchange could lead to statewide paralysis. Finally, there's patrol saturation failure. The Border Patrol is designed to manage flows of people, not a mass movement. In a large-scale crisis where millions are moving north, south, or even internally within the country, no border force on Earth could handle that volume. The system would simply get overwhelmed and choke. Once that happens, it effectively fails. These are the real weak points, the corridors where the country could break apart. What if the US border didn't just bend, but shattered in 72 hours? Today we're looking at 6 critical corridors, not just along the border but across the country, that could be the first to fall in a major crisis. Forget what you think, This is a game of infrastructure, not just immigration. First, Corridor 1, El Paso to Ciudad Juarez. I call this the 72-hour melt zone. It's already running at maximum capacity. A grid failure here is catastrophic. Within 6 hours, outbound lanes freeze, diesel supplies drop, and hospitals switch to backup power. In 24 hours, Border Patrol is immobilized and rail crossings halt. In 48 hours, the city fractures into safe and unsafe zones. This isn't a slow decline. It's a sudden snap. Next, Corridor 2, the Arizona Dry Corridor. Think of it as a collapsed funnel from Nogales to Phoenix. Phoenix is a city built on imported water in a region facing long-term drought. If the grid fails during a summer heat wave, Phoenix becomes unlivable in hours. Tucson follows in a day. The real crisis here won't be people crossing the border, but millions of Americans trying to evacuate north, turning the entire region into a mass exodus artery. Corridor 3 is the South Texas Fragility Zone, from Laredo to Brownsville. This region relies on 3 fragile systems: the Rio Grande, Valley agriculture, and just 2 fuel routes. Add extreme heat and humidity. When the grid fails, air conditioning isn't a luxury, it's life support. Once Havayets, the region effectively ceases to function, choked by heat and failing logistics. Corridor 4, San Diego to Tijuana, is about the coastal pressure wave. San Diego is strong socially but fragile infrastructurally. Southern California imports its water, its electricity, and its food. It's surrounded by mountains with limited escape routes. If the SoCal grid collapses, millions will try to evacuate north and east, creating a human pressure wave that crushes Arizona and Nevada. This corridor fails because California itself collapses. Now let's head north to Corridor 5, the forgotten industrial arteries from Detroit to Buffalo. These corridors don't fail from migration. They fail when the economy freezes. A halt in Great Lakes shipping, frozen rail lines, Or a shutdown of refineries would cause the entire Midwest economy to seize up, with brutal consequences and a harsh winter. When you think about America's borders, you're probably picturing a line in the sand, right? But what if I told you the most dangerous border is one most Americans completely forget? It's not on land, it's the Gulf Maritime border. This isn't just a stretch of water. It's the lifeblood of the nation. It holds 17% of America's oil refineries, massive petrochemical plants, export terminals, and LNG facilities. The ports here literally feed half the country. Now, imagine a powerful hurricane makes landfall. But this time, it triggers something worse. A widespread grid collapse. The refineries shut down. Suddenly, you're looking at a perfect storm of disasters. A wave of maritime migration begins, the economy starts to buckle under the pressure, and the fuel that runs our trucks, trains, and emergency services simply starves. This isn't just a local problem. This is the real trigger for a collapse across the entire southern United States. Let's break down what that looks like over 96 critical hours. In the first 6 hours, border checkpoints freeze up. Rail crossings fail. Water pumping systems slow to a trickle, and hospitals are forced onto backup generators. Seeing the chaos, cartel activity along the land border spikes. By hour 12, things get dire. Major highways like I-10, I-8, and I-35 become parking lots, slowing to a walking pace. Diesel, the fuel that keeps our supply chain moving, starts running out. The National Guard is deployed, but they're facing an impossible situation. In places like Phoenix, without power for air conditioning, temperatures quickly become unlivable. Within 24 hours, the first widespread water outages hit. Shelters are overflowing. Law enforcement loses patrol mobility as their vehicles run out of fuel. The communication grid becomes patchy, cutting people off from help and information. Local governments start declaring emergency zones, but they're quickly overwhelmed. By the 48-hour mark, the border is no longer a functional barrier. It's just a symbolic line on a map. A massive internal migration begins. People are desperate. California starts putting immense pressure on Arizona for resources, while Texas pushes against Oklahoma. The entire Southwest becomes a human pressure wave with nowhere to go. Now we're at 72 hours. Hospitals are completely overloaded. There's no diesel resupply, meaning generators at cooling centers fail. Evacuation plans for inland cities completely collapse. The border's own infrastructure, the very systems designed to manage it, are no longer operational. By the time we reach 96 hours, the corridor has fragmented. The system has broken down into 2, maybe 4 separate sectors. Emergency relocation zones are hastily formed, but they're not enough. Entire regions become isolated islands, cut off from the rest of the country, left to fend for themselves. So where do you go? When a crisis of this magnitude hits, the truly defensible zones aren't the ones you might think. They aren't based on politics or state lines, they're based on resources. We've mapped them out. First, northern Idaho and the Inland Empire Plateau. Its high elevation has stable aquifers for water, low population density, and multiple defensive corridors. Second, central and western Montana. Sparsely populated and cold, but sustainable. It would face limited pressure from migrating populations. Third, eastern Nevada and the High Basin. Again, low population. The cold nights are a huge advantage, reducing the risk of heat-related collapse. It's also geographically insulated. Fourth, Wyoming and the High Plains. Here, the water tables remain stable. There's low population pressure and multiple escape routes. Fifth is the Oklahoma-Kansas backbone. It might not sound glamorous, but it's stable. It has good water access, a lower heat risk, and strong redundancy in its road networks. And finally, western Nebraska. It's rich in aquifers, has low energy needs, and its population is less vulnerable to systemic shocks. You see, borders don't fail with a dramatic bang. They fail in silence. It starts with small collapses that chain together into a catastrophic failure. America's border won't break because people cross it. It will break when the systems that support it, water, diesel, electricity, highways, hospitals, all die. When they fail, the border becomes nothing more than a line on a map. If you want the real science of collapse, not fear, not doom, just the hard data, you are in the right place. Because the next episode reveals the one event that could trigger every single border failure simultaneously. We're talking about the Mississippi River failure scenario, and how 30% of America dies without its water highway. Make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. This is Zero Hour Atlas. We don't predict collapse. We map it.